Good morning, everybody. So this week is class 2, and today the title for our lesson plan for today is Storytelling in Unreal Engine Intro. So these first couple items we're going to be covering together when we meet at 10 o'clock today. So storytelling for designers. Actually, it's just item 1. So this is some of the information that we're going to be looking at related to storytelling. So the only thing I want to cover in this technical pre-recorded lecture is just item 2, which is an introduction to Unreal Engine. Now, as an assignment, this is not anything you have to hand in, but I would recommend going through this in great detail because we're gonna jump off and we're gonna hit the ground running next week. So you want to have a good foundation in Unreal Engine, at least in terms of navigating the environment, what the interface is all about, where everything's located, and working with projects. So I have here from LinkedIn Learning. Again, remember you have to access LinkedIn Learning from the Becker student portal, don't go directly to LinkedIn Learning. And I want you to do the Unreal Essential Training 2019 course, 2019. Now there are 2 2019 courses. The appropriate one is this one. I just put a screenshot in here so that you could see it. So if I click on that, this is it. So there's 2 2019s, and this is not the one you want to do. The one with the crane in it is not it. It's this one. So I put that there as reference so you do the right one. I mean, they're both going to present the same information. It's just structured a little differently. So make sure you go through that one. And it's modules 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. So that's quite a bit. You don't have to sit there and go, play it and then do it in Unreal. You can just kind of work your way through it in one sitting. But it's going to get us up to speed. So you want to make sure you take a look at those if you are not familiar with Unreal Engine. Again, you don't have to hand anything in. This is just to get you up to speed because we're going to just hit the ground running next week. So I'm going to do just a quick introduction to Unreal here, but most of this will be covered in much more detail in these modules here. So let me put this aside, and when you first install Unreal Engine, you're going to have your Unreal Launcher, and this is how we can access everything. So the Marketplace and the Learning section are where we can get lots and lots of pre-built assets, which we will use in this class. And then the library is where your projects are, where your engine installs are, where you can launch them from, and then anything that you've added to your library down here. So if we want to get started with a new project, we can simply just click on the big Launch Unreal Engine 4.26.1 button right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it will launch the engine. And it's going to ask me, what do I want to create? Well, I want to create a games project. We don't have to worry about the others. These just to add plugins that you could add to your games project anyway. There's no real difference here. So I'm going to choose games, and then I'll hit the next button. And then I have all the different defaults, pre-builts that I can work with. I'm just going to go with blank, and I'll hit next. And then in here, the only thing we have to be concerned about is whether we want to use starter content or not. And I'm going to say no starter content. And then where do we want to put it? So I'm going to put it on the desktop, or you can browse here for another location and give it a name. All right, so I'll hit Create Project. And now it's going to launch Unreal. You'll notice, well, you won't notice because it's out of frame, but it put a folder on my desktop called My Project. So I can take that folder anywhere. That houses all of the data that the project requires in Unreal Engine. So when I open Unreal, the first thing we want to do is we want to figure out how to navigate. This is very similar to any 3D environment. I can use my left mouse button to go forward, back, and look left, right. I can use my middle mouse button to track up, down, and left and right. And I can use my right mouse button to look around. Now, I think a really good navigation tool is to use the right mouse button. I have that held down, And then I use my W, A, S, and D keys to move and strafe left and right, move back, move forward. And if I do that while I have my right mouse button down, I can kind of orient myself as I'm moving around an object. So that's the W, A, S, and D key with the left or right mouse button held down. Now, if you want to go faster or slower, we have a camera speed button up here. So if you're navigating a giant open world, you might want to increase this. If you're working in a small area, you might want to decrease that. The other thing we have is we have Maya navigation. So if I want to really focus on an object, like for instance, I'll take this object here, what I can do is select it and then hit the F key on the keyboard for frame, F for frame. Then I can use my Alt button, so I'm holding down the Alt key and using my left mouse button, and I can orbit around what I've framed. So that's Alt and left mouse button. And then the middle mouse button will track, and the right mouse button will zoom in and out, just like Maya. So that's using the F key to frame and then the Alt key and your mouse buttons to navigate. So that's very useful also. And that's about the extent of it for just navigating the environment. I think it's fairly intuitive. In here we have on the right or left-hand side, these are objects we can add, objects that are in the engine. Across the top, we just have different menu items that we'll look at when we need them. And then over on the right-hand side, we have our outliner right at the top, much like Maya's outliner. And then down here is the details panel. That's like Maya's attribute editor. So whatever object I have selected in the scene or in the outliner, I will see its attributes down here. And then along the bottom, we have the content browser, which is our library. This is where we can import stuff. And then we have the sequencer, and that's where we'll be spending a lot of our time, and we'll probably get started on that next week. That's how we can create our cinematics. So the only other thing I wanted to do for this quick intro to working in Unreal is manipulating objects. Again, it's much like Maya. So I'm going to put an object in the scene. I'm going to come over here to the basic category of the place actors window, and I will put a cube in the scene. I'm going to hit F to frame it, and there's my object. So I can manipulate it. We see it has by default the move manipulators on it. Here's my move, rotate, and scale. They're all listed right here. Or it's the exact same keyboard shortcuts as Maya. W is move, E is rotate, and R is scale. W, E, and R. So I'm going to rotate this just a little bit. Now when I rotate it, you'll notice that the rotate manipulator is no longer aligned to the object. It's staying aligned to the world. And that toggle switch is right here. When it looks like the globe, it means it's aligned. Your manipulator tools are oriented to the world. If I click on that, they're now oriented to the object. So you see the difference there. There's object and there's world. Now, unless you rotate an object in the scene, you won't notice a difference between these two. It's only after you rotate an object so that it's no longer oriented to the world, then this toggle switch makes a difference. So if I go back to my move tool, we see that's local, which makes sense because I can move it in the direction it's facing. But if I switch it to world, it's not so easy. But there are times that you want to use world or object, so you just want to be aware of that there. And then right next to it, these are my snaps. So if I want to snap to move or snap to rotate, they're listed here. I typically turn those off. Sometimes I'll use rotate snaps if I want to, rotate an object exactly 180 degrees to turn it around or something like that. And it tells you there as you're rotating it how many degrees you've gone. So those are the basic manipulators. Another interesting thing is when you're working in a level and you want to move objects around and do set dressing, holding the shift key down is great, because if you hold the shift key down and use the manipulators, the camera goes along for the ride. So this is a great way to, well, let me see, I'm going to just zero this object out. So I'm going to come over here to its details panel, and I'll zero out its rotates here. So it's upright again. There we go. So if I want to quickly make a series of these objects in the scene, I could start over here. I'm holding shift down so I can move with the object. And the Alt key is actually will allow us to make duplicates. So if I hold down Alt and Shift, I can now pull out duplicates and just move right along with them like this, which is a really nice feature. And then I have all of these duplicates. And then one last thing we want to be aware of is there's going to be plenty of times where you might want to change where the pivot point is on an object. Maybe I need to rotate this from an edge instead of from the center. So the way we do that is by holding down the Alt key and then using our middle mouse button. And see, it's now allowing me to move the origin. So I'll move it out to here, and then I'll also bring it right up to the edge. So again, I'm holding down Alt with the middle mouse button. Now this is going to be temporary. If I click away from it and click back, it's going to reset itself. If you want to keep this permanent, what you need to do is once you change where the pivot is, before you do anything else, right click on that pivot tool, and I just missed it. Let me do that again. All right, so I'm going to move this up to right there. Then I'm going to right click on it. Oh gosh, just did it again. Sometimes this can be a real pain. All right, so move it back up to here. And let me put myself right in the middle there. There we go. And now I'm going to come down. This is being cut off. I have to come down here. There's an option called pivot. And then inside there is another option that says set as pivot offset. And when I do that, it then keeps it there. So now if I click away from it and come back, that pivot stays there. And now I can swing that object from that location. So what I want to do is give you the quick rundown on fundamentals of what the first things you want to figure out no matter what 3D application you're working in. How do you navigate, and how do you manipulate objects? So those are a few things to get you started. Like I said, though, the lessons are going to the LinkedIn Learning lessons are going to give you a much more detailed description of all of this. The only other thing I want to point out before I end this lesson for today is when you start finding stuff in the marketplace or the learn section and you add those to your library. Now the marketplace is going to have things that are very expensive, and it's going to have lots of stuff that's free. If I go to the marketplace, you'll see here that there's a free section, and there's lots of free content. So once you start collecting that content, it's going to go into your library. And in your library, you're going to have, some things are going to say add to project, and some things will say create project for whatever reason. I'm not really sure what the rhyme or reason is to this. So if it says create project, that's fine. That's basically what you're going to be doing is downloading it, and it's going to create a new project folder for it. If it says add to project, it means you need to already have an Unreal Engine project created, and then you can add this content to that project. So I have my project right here. So let's see, I'll grab, you can't see it, I forgot, it's off screen. I have my project is on the desktop, the one I just created. I'll choose this animal variety pack. So I'll just do add to project. And this window comes up and it's looking at all my current projects. And right there is the one I just made. So I'll select that and say add to project. And now it's downloading it and putting it into that project. Now I still have that project open. So you don't have to close out of your project. You can have your project open and then add new content to it. And as soon as this gets done here, all right. Now you'll notice underneath it says cache size 517 megs. This is actually storing it in a location somewhere on your hard drive. Now, it already added it to the project, but it's keeping another copy of it on your hard drive somewhere in case you want to access it again. You don't have to re-download it. These cache files can add up. So my suggestion is once you add it to your project, click on this drop box and say remove local content. That does not mean that it's removing it from your project. It means it's removing it from its cached folder that is buried in some unusual location on your hard drive. So I'm going to say remove local content. So see that it doesn't say cache anymore. See, I have one over here, another project I was working on. That one is still in my cache folder. I don't need it anymore because it's already in my project. So I'll do the same thing there. Remove the local content. So now if I go to my project, down here in my content browser, my library, there's the folder. Whoops, can I bring that up? There we go, right here. And let me make these a little smaller. There we go, okay. So I'll go into Crow, Meshes, and here's my Crow. So now I can put my Crow, whoops, put my Crow out here into the scene. So that's how I can add content. Now, the problem with this is, what if I only wanted the crow? I didn't want everything else because I also have a deer and a doe and a fox and a pig and a wolf, but I only wanted the crow. Well, I guess I could take all of these and just delete them because you don't want to balloon your project up unnecessarily, and these can get big. So another way, what I usually do is because I have to add this to a project, what I usually do is I create a temporary project. And in that temporary project is where I add the content because it's going to add everything. Then I go into that temporary project and I migrate only what I need to my real project folder. So let's assume that this is my temporary project folder. Or project, my temporary project. So I've brought all of this content in and I only want the crow. So what I can do, I could do the whole folder, or I could do just the crow mesh itself, which I'm going to do that because I don't need maps or anything else like that. So I'm going to go into mesh. And what I can do is I can right click on the asset that I want to migrate and go to Asset Actions and choose Migrate. Not Export. Export just gets it out so you can edit it in Maya or something like that. I'm going to do Migrate. So the first thing it will do, well, it says, hey, you changed the level. Do you want to save it? I don't have to save it in order to make this work. So I'll say don't save. So the first thing it does is it says, hey, here's all of the assets that make up that crow. Do you want all of these assets? Well, most of the time you do. So I'll say okay. And then it wants to know where do I want to migrate that those crow assets to. So you need to find the content folder of your project. So even though it's already in this current project, let's pretend that it's not. So if I say, okay, I'm going from my temporary project where I've imported all of those assets, I now want to put just the crow's content into my project. So I'm going to go into my project, and it has to go into a content folder. It cannot be placed anywhere else. It has to go to an Unreal Engine content folder. If you try to put it in any other folder, it will give you an error. So I choose the content folder and say select. Now it says, hey, this stuff already exists because I'm trying to put it back into, I'm trying to migrate it into the same project that it came out of. But you get the idea here. We create a temp project so we can load everything into it. Then we selectively migrate the assets that we want out of that temp project into our real project. So I wouldn't get this message. It would just say, hey, everything migrated successfully and you're ready to go. So that's a quick rundown of manipulating objects, navigating the viewports, and also managing content with Unreal Engine. I think it's all pretty straightforward. So I'm going to stop this lesson. This is a very brief one. I'm going to stop this here, and I will then see everybody at 10 o'clock today in Teams.